He goes on to say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He is the only way. He goes, I am the resurrection and the life. He says, I am not only the door, but he goes on to say, I am the good shepherd. I am so thankful. I am so thankful that he is the good shepherd, that I am the sheep, that I don't know how many times I've been hit, that he still pulls me in with that rod. It's not only just to hit me. It's not only just to correct you. It's to love on you and saying, I want you. He goes on to say, I am the vine. You're the only way that you want to continue your life. You got to be connected to the vine, the branches. Then he goes on to say, not only am I the vine, he goes, but before Abraham was, I am. Before Abraham was, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, how in the world did he say that? Again, going to a Christophany. A Christophany is Jesus being visible in a bodily form before the incarnation. It's a temporary appearance of Jesus. And so I just wanted to say that because we see who Jesus is in the New Testament, but we're going to carry that over and tie it in how he is alive and he's acting and he's present in the Old Testament. And so I want to jump into scriptures in Exodus 3, 1 through 6. And I just want to highlight a few things. And it goes on to say, now Moses, as tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and camped and came to how do I say that name? Horeb. You're like, what? But I love this part when he says this. The mountain of God. The mountain of God. There was something about being at this specific mountain that God claimed for him, that claimed as his. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within the bush. Moses saw the bush was on fire, but it did not burn up. Moses saw that the bush was on fire, but it did not burn up. So he thought, I will go over and see the strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. And I love the fact that I'm going to camp on this a little bit where it says, I will go over, I will turn aside. There is something about this bush being on fire. I want you to think of something strange, something like, what is it that captures our attention? When we go to a theme park, when we go to whatever it may be, something on YouTube, they're like, oh, I got to stop. I got to watch this video. I got to see what happens. Something captures our attention. You got to understand, Moses was in the wilderness coming up to 40 years. 40 years. He could have seen some other strange things, or maybe it was just mundane wilderness, right? There's the sagebrush. There's the cactus again. I mean, it was normal. When you go to work, we're like on cruise control when we get in the car, right? Our body knows when to turn. The car, we just simply get in there. Same thing walking to school. It doesn't matter. It just goes naturally. That's what was happening to Moses during this time. He was not having a God encounter. He was not going out to the wilderness expecting God is going to speak to me today. He was doing his due diligence of just going and being a shepherd. God is saying, I just need you to do your due diligence and doing what you are doing, whether you're a teacher, whether you're working at a bank, whether you are an owner, whether it may be you are a mom, you're a full-time business owner, literally in your own house. And whatever it may be, you may be doing that. But then all of a sudden, he goes on to say, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. And only then when Moses turned, only then when we finally hear God, or we say like, hey, this is something strange, even if we don't know it's God, but we give it our attention. When the Lord saw he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush. God only began to speak to Moses when he turned. Oh my gosh, how many times have we missed that? How many times have I missed that? That do we really need to see a huge burning flaming going on? It may not happen. It just happened to Moses. But God is trying to get our attention, and I love it because sometimes it's always in the whisper. And we have so much distractions, so many things calling for our attention. So many things that are wanting to take our time. And God said, he's calling out to you and wanting those God encounters with him. And he goes on to say, when he turned, and I want you to really pinpoint this. You see how it says Moses in an exclamation? It wasn't Moses. I want you to think of a friend, maybe a child. It's a lot easier for a child with exclamation. How does that sound? I'll tell you how it sounded in my house. Sabrina! I mean, there was no other child being called that at this time, right? It was such a voice, such a distinct voice that there was no confusion of who it was. For example, if it was my mom, it was no confusion even more if it was my dad. I didn't question who it was. I gave it my full attention. And so many times, I love that he called out to Moses, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. This is our reaction we have to have, is here I am. It wasn't he called and he kept going on about his business. He didn't call. He only called when he turned. That's what God is asking us. And I want you to jump down to verse 12 and 13. And God said, I will be with you. And this is the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. God gives us a sign and confirms that it is not you. It's not your talents. It's not your gifting. It is me working in and through you. Do not be confused with that. And I love that because God said, this will be the sign. Remember that mountain of God. This will be the sign. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, suppose I go to Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And I love the fact that he says that the God of your fathers, not our fathers. He's a part of that family. That's where you can see how secluded he felt. He didn't know if he was Egyptian. He didn't know if he was an Israelite. He didn't know where he landed. He goes on to say, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they asked me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God says to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. And again, talk about the appearance of the angel of the Lord. In this portion of scripture, represents Jesus. The angel of the Lord. And we begin to see the entire dialogue. I was sharing with Sister Rose, our church secretary, that if you didn't know, Sister Rose and her husband, Richard, have been coming faithfully to this church because they feel that they are to serve in this house. Talk about a commitment driving over. And whatever that may look like, that is having them turn aside. Talk about it, turn aside, like you're going. But I love that. I was telling her, I said, this is the one part of the scriptures that I thought, man, I wish I could have been right next to Moses. I wish I could have been maybe a sheep. Maybe it was just a person assisting Moses during that time, because he's having a full-on conversation with this angel of the Lord. And we get to read this angel of the Lord and the full conversations of, I don't know whether I should be doing this. I don't know if I can lead these people. I am not adequate. I am unworthy. And he's having all of this happening. And how many of us do the same thing to Lord, right? But I love the fact that because it shows in scripture that this so-called Egyptian who was a prince, you would think that he had security. You would think that he was more secure. He still had his doubts. It doesn't matter your position. You got to remember, it is God in you. It is not about your position. But it goes on to say that through this entire dialogue, the angel of the Lord, who is Jesus in bodily form, is the mouthpiece of God speaking to Moses. We are to be the mouthpiece of God. It's not that God is calling just Moses. He calls every single man and woman that says yes. When his response to God was, here I am, he says, I am listening. Tell me what to do. Show me the way, direct me. But I want to again go back to that verse, chapter, in the verses 2 and 4. And I want to paraphrase it this way. The angel of the Lord appeared, creating something unimaginable to capture Moses' attention, to turn aside and to linger in his presence. When we read the chapter, we think it was just a quick 5 to 10 minute conversation. We don't know what that looked like. It makes you wonder, like, what were the sheep doing? Like I try to get into the story. I want to be there. And I don't know about you, but again, having a conversation face to face with this burning bush, Jesus. And because I said, I turned to look and not going there to have an all-out prayer meeting. I wasn't going there to seek God. I was just doing my daily duty things of being a shepherd. I had a God encounter. The way Jesus encountered Moses is the same way that Jesus wants to encounter us today. Don't think about it as being in the Old Testament. Jesus is our greatest example. And he shows us he's the greatest example of being so hungry. Like Pastor Abel had just mentioned, that he wanted to go to the mountainside, that he wanted to encounter and make sure he spent time with his Abba Father. This intimacy, ongoing intimacy, is what gave him his wisdom, his power, his compassion for people. So many times we think, well, he was Jesus. But guess what? Jesus was just as flesh as you and I are today. He did not, there's people that think, well, he could have called down and did this and that. I don't feel he could have. He could have had God do it, but Jesus could not do it himself. He was fully human. That's why he relied and before he even started his ministry, he had to have those God encounters and tuck away and prepare him for the wilderness of 40 days and 40 nights. It was during those times that helped him prepare him for his ministry. It's being away with the Lord that helped you prepare you for your job, for your career, for your being a mom, for being a dad, for being a college student. Whatever it may be, it's those times that God helps you to prepare you for what is ahead. So often when I think about me turning aside growing up, I often remember going to church camp. Like, church camp was the best. Like, that sounds a little cunning, but it was a little bit trying to get away with things, but then encounter God, right? But I was on the good side. I wasn't with Pastor Abel. No, I'm kidding. Pastor Abel and Liz were not in church. No, I'm kidding. But we all did go to the same camp. And I love the church camp. And it was so cool. And I brag about this every time. We had a bus back in the day that would break down on us every single time. Like, it was only God's grace that we didn't have a God encounter on the bus burning up. But we would get there, putting away. And there was like 60 of us on that bus. And there was something about being away in the wilderness for me. And it was something of being away from the church. And you would think, well, they had no cell phones. Well, we just did not have cell phones. There was no such thing as cell phones at that time. And, or there was a megaphone. I think it was this big. My dad had one. And, but there was something about being there. And it was in those moments it helped create me to be me. I remember going to the altars and just crying my heart out and saying, God, I feel like I got nothing, but whatever I have, I give to you. And it was during those moments that I had those God encounters that when the rough time came and I wanted to feel like, God, I'm not good enough, there was those times like, remember who you are. Remember whose you are. You got to sometimes go back to those God encounters that had you and he captivated you. And if you can't remember, go back to those moments. I'm not telling you to recreate that moment. There's never going to be the same moment. It's always a new moment. It's always a different way of doing it. But again, Jesus is our greatest example of withdrawing and spending time with God before he began his ministry. Turning aside helped him to make important decisions. Turning aside helped him to make important decisions, like when the woman with the woman at the well, who was the Samaritan. At that time, in a sense, that men were not to talk, even much less to the Samaritan women, and the Samaritan people, much less the woman. It was during that important decision he knew he had to call his disciples awake to say, "Go get some food." Hey, I have a God encounter. I have a God moment. She is going to have a moment with me. She was not seeking to find Jesus. What was she doing? She was simply going to get water. You could be going to go get gas. You could be going on a workout. You could be, whatever it is, she was just doing whatever. And she was about to have a God encounter, a moment with him. Jesus, in turning aside, helped him to deal with the trouble emotions like grief. When he lost the loved one of his Lazarus, it still hurt him. He was still crying about it. But at the end, it was during those moments where he says, turn aside, that God's going to say, I am going to resurrect Lazarus through you. You're going to call out his name, saying, Lazarus, Lazarus, come forth. It was in turning aside with Jesus to help him deal with constant demands of his ministry, teaching his disciples. You got to remember this Jesus. If there's ever a show that I would love to promote, it's this show. It's phenomenal. And it's a series called Chosen. If there has ever been a movie about Jesus, like the best, 100% one better than all the rest, it's Chosen. I do not like to watch Christian movies. I know that sounds horrible. Because they're super cheesy. Like, so cheesy. Like, why can't it don't air it. Just put it on. Is it PureFlix or something like that? Like, oh man. Okay, God forbid. Sorry if you watch that. It's really good. But but there's a moment in this, and if you haven't watched it, again, go watch it. Season 2, episode 4. And it literally paints this picture. Turning aside helped him deal with constant demands of his ministry, teaching his disciples. And there's a point of this. We got to remember Jesus was fully what? Human. You have to understand, it wasn't just the 12 that followed him. That could have been okay. I don't know. If you have more than one kid, are you okay with them following you 24/7? Gabe? Yeah. You're like, they barely came to church. No kidding. I am the youngest of 7. I know, you're like, I know. My mom's is one of 12. I know. I'm like, what? That's why cell phones were invented. No, I'm kidding. But I want you to think about people following you. And there's only so much you want them to follow you. You're like, okay, I'm going to go home. I want to rest. I want to do my 9 to 5, clocked in. God bless you. I prayed for you. Whatever. Jesus, that was not his story. He was famous, like the utmost famous. He tried to go hide away. Like somebody had the 411 on Jesus at all times. They're like, he's going this way. Everybody, get the whole town, every sick person, every ill person, every demon-possessed person, anybody that has an issue, we need to go find Jesus. Talk about tiring. Talk about laying hands on the sick that they shall be healed. Talk about at the end of the day, and it wasn't the 9 to 5 clock in, clock out. There was times that he would literally say, the disciples go rest, let me do this. And there's an episode on there that he's literally been working all day trying to heal people, and you see the disciples arguing. I want you to think of that, Jesus, that when it came down to it, I got to continue to do ministry, but it's only in my turning aside that I can continue to fulfill what God has called me to do on this earth, and then disciple the 12 that aren't all together, that I got to help them get it together. This Jesus, the one that turned and went to be on the mountaintop with Jesus, with God. The one that says, I have to get away from my daily activities. I have to get away from the demands of ministry. I have to get away from people. He found moments, and it wasn't convenient moments. It was in the nighttime. It was wee early in the morning hours. It was the times where he says, I am hungry, but he couldn't eat. Sometimes in turning aside, it's not convenient. And it might even make you feel uncomfortable. Like if you're around your friends and you feel like God's nudging at you and saying, hey, I need to talk to you. It's not like you're going to say, hold on. I got to go talk to Jesus really quick. Some people don't do that. It's a little embarrassing. You're going to say, God, I'll talk to you tonight at the prayer time. You already know what time we're going to meet, right? You know our time. That's not how it worked. And that's not how it works. God talks to you when he wants to talk to you. I was in the store at Walmart. Ours is Mall-Mart, okay? That's the only thing we got in Moses Lake. And I saw this gal, and I remember her name, and she was hunched over. And I walked by her, and I thought, oh, God, man, I know you can heal her. And he's like, well, go pray for her. I'm like, no, God, you can heal her. And I was like, oh, and I remember doing that. I was like, oh. And I was with my friend Amelia. She's like, God saw you to pray for her, huh? No, he told me to tell you to go pray for her. No, he told you. I was like, yeah, I got to go. Let's go pray for her. I'm like, okay, God, we'll just pray for her. And so I'm walking behind her, and then I'm trying to be so it's not so awkward for her, because I didn't want it to be like, oh my gosh, there's people now going inside Walmart praying for people. And then there was a gal stocking shelves. And so every time I would take a step, the person stocking the shelf would move all her stuff and then move all her stuff. I was like, no, Lord, she knows I can't do it with this lady. She just keeps moving. So I was like, oh, fine, let's go around. Let's go trap her. So I go around. I see her, and I just was like, oh, this is so weird. Like, how do I start this conversation? Like, I'm just going to pray for you. You can't just say that. Not everybody goes to church. Like, what are you doing touching me at this point, 6 foot? She was good. She didn't have a mask, so I knew I was in the clear. And those are the little details you can pick up. And I just said, hi. I literally sounded like that. Hi, my name is Sabrina, and I go to church. I wasn't going to say I'm a pastor. Who cares what I do? I just go to church, and I just really believe in the power of prayer, and I just feel led to pray for you, if that's okay. I know that you have a hump on your back, and so I was just like, what's the worst she's going to say is no. I was like, well, I did my job, and so I said, well, what is that? How did you? She goes, yeah, doesn't hurt to pray. I was like, that's what I think too. Made it a lot easier. It doesn't always happen that way, okay? But and I said, well, what's your name? She's like, my name's Shirley. She goes, yeah, I had gotten this, I don't even remember how long, but it was from scoliosis. And I just was like, oh my gosh. I mean, and I give this woman props, because she didn't have her husband or a child or a friend. She was so hunched over still that she had a full cart, and she was still being mom. Whatever she was doing, it wasn't going to hinder her. And I prayed for her. And we prayed for her, and I wish that her back would have came up, because that's what I was like, just leave, let me just straighten you up, right? I was like, come on, God, and I wanted to see that, and good Lord, Shirley would love that more than me. But it was during that moment saying, God, just saying, I just need you to obey me, and whatever happens to Shirley, and that's why I said, God, if you decide to heal Shirley the next day or whatever it may be, then so be it. And I'm saying that because it's in those moments, it's the uncomfortable moments that God says, I'm about to have an encounter with you, and I'm going to teach you something. I was like, oh, Walmart? Can we just do it at the altar on Sunday? That's what we want. That's what we want. What is God trying to tell you? God, and I love what Daniel Colinda says this, and I don't want to mess up his quote, but he says, the first thing is whenever God has it in his heart to do something, he looks for a man or woman through whom he can display his power through. He's not looking for a prince. He's not looking for a shepherd. He's looking for you. Nothing will happen in your city of Pasco, in our nation, unless it comes through the body of Christ, the people of God. Angels are not commissioned to lay hands upon the sick or preach the gospel. You and I are, sons and daughters are. And Jesus is waiting and still saying, how many of you are going and willing to turn aside to me? How many are willing to turn aside to me? He wants our attention. The world fights for it, but we have to learn to give it and discern when it's Jesus speaking to us, when it's Holy Spirit nudging at us, when it's Abba Father saying, I want to tuck away with my son and daughter.